The previous lessons we've looked at how powerful arrays are in JavaScript. So in this lesson we're going to dive deeper into what can be done with arrays. So let's open up our editor and take a look through. So we initially created an array called myArrayA, and in this lesson we're going to dive deeper into what we can do with arrays. So we showed you how we can push an item and we can push it to the end of the array. So what happens if you actually want to remove an item from an array? So I'm going to remove the last item, and the way that we do that is we use pop. So simply the function pop, and what this is going to do is this is going to remove that last item from the array, and I'm just looking at where I've got that console log of that myArray. So remember again, before we come and we hit pop, we've got an array that contains 6 items, 6 values, the last one being 6. Now we're going to do pop and we're going to remove that last one. So let's refresh it, and we see that we're removing index item number 5, which is the last one. So now we've got our brand new array with that last item removed. Well, let's say you don't want to remove the last one, but you want to remove the first one. So there's a function for this as well within arrays. So we're going to do myArrayA, and instead of pop, this time we're going to do shift. And what this does is this essentially drops the first item and shifts the other ones over. So they're not going to be these static values, and this is one of the benefits of doing things dynamically, is because your array is ever changing. So a lot of times when you're developing in JavaScript, your variables and your values are changing, and this is no different than when you're working with arrays. So this is why we try to avoid having this static value of 4 when we're calling an item in the array, unless it so calls for within the script, and we make it dynamically if maybe we want to always see what the end item is. So let's open up our editor and we'll see what the shift does. And what the shift does is it dropped the value of 1. So essentially it dropped that first one out of the front of the array. So let's say now we don't like this value of 5 and we want to update it. We want to make sure that instead of 5, because this is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3. So let's say that we want 5 to say 3. So we're going to look at, again, calling via the index number, so myArrayA, and remember how we called the value, so we did it by index value 3. We can also reassign a brand new value to it, and I'm going to reassign capitals 3 there. And we'll list out that array again in the console, so we've got really making good use of console log within this lesson. So when we refresh it, now we've changed 5 to 3. And it's just that easy to work with arrays. So also, let's take a look at what happens when we want to see the index number. So maybe we've got a value of 3, but we don't remember exactly where it's positioned within our array. And this is going to make a lot more sense once we look at sorting, because of course now we know where we've positioned 3. So let's open that up again, and we're going to pick up the index value of 3. So maybe instead of updating, I'm just going to do it right within the console. So we're not going to actually update anything in the array, we're just going to output a value. So this time we're going to use the myArray, and we're going to use a method called indexOf, and essentially this returns the index value of the given element that we're looking for within the array. And if it's not within the array, we're going to get a value of -1. Essentially, this is a quick way that we can actually find if a value is contained within the array. So let's look for the value of 3 and see if something gets returned. So refreshing again, and we see that it's the third item in there. And let's say if we did something like x3, and now we should get a value of -1, because it's actually not sitting in the array. So it's gone through 0, 1, 2, 3, and it says, okay, well, it's not in here, so it's -1 because it's sitting outside of the array. It's not within that array. So then it tries to return that position. So we also have the ability to splice out multiple items out of the array. So if we want to remove maybe the last 2 items or something like that, we can do that as well within the array. So let's do a splice. So another method, and as you can see, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can literally do with arrays, and this is why we say that working with arrays and holding these values within the arrays is really beneficial when you're trying to work with JavaScript, because it gives you all of this added functionality that makes it really easily to add new contents, to change contents of the array, move things around, and so on. So this time we're going to look at the array, and we're going to take out the last item from the array. So we need to specify our starting position. So let's start it at position number 2. We'll remove out only 1 item. And of course we could remove out multiple items if we wanted to. So again, we'll console log this out, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to comment out a bunch of this stuff because it's really not relevant to what we're doing right now within the code. So see how that turns out, so that we don't have a whole bunch of this console log stuff showing up. So now we see that we took index value 2, which was 55, and we removed that out, and now we're just outputting it. And we could remove more items as well. So we can also unshift as well. So if we want to remove out a specific item out of there, if we want to remove out 3, we can do my array, and I know my array is starting to shrink down, so we might have to look at updating this array and adding to that array as well. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So there's unshift, and we're going to unshift that value of 3 and see if we can get that removed out from the array as well. So let's try this and see what this looks like. So there was an error with the way I defined the myArray because I didn't put the myArray A. So of course, and this is another really benefit to using your dev tools. That I got the error. I mean, errors are never good, but this was a good demonstration about how errors work in JavaScript. And we see that myArray is not defined. So we know that that's the problem, that we haven't defined myArray. And that's because I really haven't defined myArray because the value we're working with is myArray A. So we see that unshift, what that does is that adds in the value of 3 in the beginning there as well. And let's go back into here and talk more about index of. So I'm going to get rid of some of this stuff here, and we're going to look at index of. So one of the things was that we had looked at, well, you know, we've got this index of, and I'm going to get rid of the splicing as well because, again, this is getting a lot more complex here. So we've got index of 3 there, and so we're getting that value that for 3. Let's take a look at what else we can do with arrays, and another really cool thing that we can do with arrays, and I should also say very useful, is sorting. So essentially this sorts an array in place and reorders the array. So now when we console log out the array, and I do want to add in some additional numbers, and the reason being is the way that it sorts it. So we've got some values there, so we've got more stuff there to sort. So the way it's going to sort it's going to sort it numerically first, and then it's going to sort it alphabetically. So let's take a look and see what happens. And we see once we sort it, that it's taking a brand new order. And another thing to note here is that, so we did it numerically and then we did it through characters, but we noticed that it took that uppercase first. So it goes numbers, uppercase, and then lowercase when it does the sorting. So this is by default built into that method. And now if I do an index of 3, we're going to see that that index has changed. And this is another one of those things that if I was actually updating it dynamically, so if we did something, or maybe we can do something like that. So these are no longer going to be the same, and we're taking the value of the last one, it's going to change as opposed to the value that's going to be contained within there. And I know we don't just have 4 in there, we have 6 different items in there, so we'd have to list this out as 5 in order to get that last value. But essentially, no matter what, we're returning that value of 4. So even though after we do the sorting there, we're returning that value of 4 that's being returned back. The reason why it's 4 is because we actually did our sort. So I didn't actually output the sort there. So let's try to do this way and demonstrate the benefits of being dynamic is that we have the ability to update and always get that last one that's being shown here. So besides sorting, we can also sort in the reverse order. So we've got our my array, always call identify the one that you want to work with, the variable you want to work with, and we have reverse. So essentially it does the opposite of sort. So it's just going to essentially sort that array in reverse order. And maybe for this one we'll just output that array and show you that in fact it is now a reverse order. So starting with the lowercase, uppercase, and then numeric. And we can also have the ability to join arrays together. So we're going to be looking at that and then additional stuff that we do with arrays and more functionality. So that's coming up in the next set of lessons.